Yeah, I think.
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Atsiri Camarena. I am the Director of Civic Leadership for Empower LA. I want to go ahead and introduce today's training, which will be on behalf of the Department of Disability for social media with the new ADA requirements for web and mobile accessibility. With us here tonight, along with Ashley Rodriguez, who is the public, she is the, sorry, let me, uh, where's this? Okay, public information officer from the City of Los Angeles Department of Disability. Along with Ashley, we also have our team from our Empower LA. We have Ava Marinelli, who is our public information officer. With us as well, providing support is our administrative service team management analyst, Henry Lowe, who will be helping facilitate some of the Q&A questions at the bottom. For those who are joining in, just some housekeeping rules. Tonight's training is being recorded. We will be able to provide the slides as well as the training recording to all those who are present and those who weren't unable to make it. And we'll also be able to post this webinar onto our Empower LA training portion of our website, which we'll be able to share as well. Tonight's function as well, we have a Q&A, so we won't be able to acknowledge your raise hand function. However, there is a live Q&A. So if you have any questions or need clarification throughout the training, feel free to plug in your questions. Myself and Henry and Ava will be facilitating some of the questions that are coming in and help you answer them as they're coming in. We will also be having a Q&A portion towards the very end. Again, these questions will only be answered pertaining to the web and mobile accessibility on social media, not anything else pertaining to right now with the ADA requirements that are developing. So tonight will be solely focused on the social media for web and mobile accessibility. So please make sure that as you ask your questions, they are pertaining specifically to social media and ADA requirements. We do have translation services as well. So si necesita traducción, por favor, seleccione el icono del globo que está en su pantalla abajo. So, sí tenemos traducción disponible para los que necesitan traducción en español. Hay un icono abajo de la pantalla que es como un globo. Seleccione eso y va a tener traducción por el resto del entrenamiento. For those who need translation, there is an interpretation in the bottom. So please feel free if you do have any board members who still might want to join in, and perhaps they didn't know that we did have translation services. It is this accessible for tonight's training. Thank you again, Ashley, for joining us and making yourself accessible. I know that there's a lot of developments going on with this new law that was mandated. Luckily, there's an extension that is happening right now, but I do want to thank you for just being a part of this and be able to provide us at least some information on behalf of your office from the Department of Disability. So with that, I'll shift it over to you to begin the presentation.
Okay, great. Did you want to start recording or are you already recording?
We began recording, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Excuse me, Ms. Camarena, can you assign us, we don't see the globe yet, so we can sign into the Spanish channel?
Okay, how about now? Can you see it now, Ricky? I'm assuming so because I don't hear him anymore.
I think, yes, that's a good assumption.
Okay. I'll go over to the other side in the meantime, but thank you, Ashley.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Ashley Rodriguez. I am the Public Information Officer for the Department on Disability. I'm going to change my layout here just a little bit. Okay. Can everybody see the slides? Can everybody see and hear me all right? Yes, sounds good. Okay. So today's presentation is going to be covering social media accessibility and the Americans with Disabilities Act, specifically the final rule for web and mobile accessibility. So I'm going to walk you through the key points to help you understand compliance standards and to help you feel confident making content that everyone can access. I am going to switch my screen to content only so we can focus on the slides. Great. Today's agenda is going to cover the Disability Resource Library, the ADA final rule for web and mobile accessibility, social media accessibility requirements and best practices, and working with accessibility and different social media platforms, and then we'll go into our Q&A. So the Department on Disability has developed a resource library that includes a ton of information to provide guidance on accommodations, accessibility, citywide accessibility, how it applies to our departments, offices, bureaus, and neighborhood councils, and then the services that Department on Disability provides. The reason why I'm bringing this up so early is because we actually have recorded trainings and these slide decks available as PDFs. So if you go into the resource library and you're looking into the accessibility guidance section, you would go under web and mobile accessibility, and you would be able to access a ton of information about the final rule and resources. And then if you scroll down, you would see the DoD provided staff trainings. We have one on social media accessibility, where you can watch the video on YouTube and download the slide deck. We also have Introduction to ADA Requirements for Web and Mobile Accessibility, and Best Practices for Creating Accessible Documents. I saw a few questions in the responses when you guys registered for this, talking about or asking about creating accessible documents. This one goes over Word documents and PDFs, how to remediate them, and how to best build them for accessibility. So, the Americans with Disabilities Act, about 2 years ago, in 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice adopted the final rule on web and mobile accessibility, adding Subpart H to the ADA's Title II regulations. This addition focuses on web and mobile accessibility, recognizing that local governments are using digital platforms more often to deliver services and information about programs. This is a really important step towards ensuring everyone in our community has equal access to city services and online information. So it was a huge win, and we're excited. If you didn't know, the ADA has 5 titles. Title II applies to state and local government programs, services, activities, facilities, and information. This is where the regulations adopted under the final rule are located. Specifically, the final rule adds to Subpart H and adds corresponding definitions in Subpart A to ADA Title II. This regulation is structured in a way that only the first section of Subpart H specifies what's required. I don't want to get too technical, but it does outline the majority of the regulation and exceptions to the full compliance. It is not intended to convey that we should be looking for exceptions to compliance, but it's important to understand the regulations so that we can apply the requirements and exceptions properly once the final rule goes into effect. And I highly recommend going onto our resource library and watching the video on the introduction to the final rule for more information about the exceptions. So, as part of the City of Los Angeles, every department, office, bureau, neighborhood council is responsible for making sure their services, programs, and activities are accessible to people with disabilities. This has been a part of the ADA since the beginning, part of Title II, and now we're including websites, apps, and the content on them. So when websites, apps, and the content on them are not accessible, they can create barriers for people with disabilities trying to access essential information, resources, and public services. This rule is designed to provide us as a city clear guidance on how to comply with the ADA and support our constituents. As part of a local government agency of 50,000 or more people, our compliance date is set for April 24th, 2027. This is including that 1-year extension. The deadline was originally set for April 24th, 2026. And then just a few days before that, they extended the deadline 1 year. So after those dates, covered entities have legal obligation to maintain compliance. So that means that there are really no opportunities to correct potential violations after the compliance date. The time to correct non-compliance is now through the compliance deadline. So we're getting started now. We're learning how to make things accessible. And after this date, you will have a legal obligation to maintain accessibility to be compliant. So the general requirement in the final rule is that public entities have to make sure that their websites, web content, and mobile apps are readily accessible and usable by people with disabilities. Web content includes the text, images, videos, and documents that are posted on a website. It's the information and media that users interact with when they visit a site. A website refers to the platform or infrastructure where content is posted, and it includes the design, structure, controls, and other technical aspects. So, I'm so sorry. Okay. The rule applies whether the services are provided directly by the city or through contractual licenses or other arrangements. So by that, I mean that this also applies to if a website is hosted by a different platform, if somebody that you're contracting with is managing your website or your social media content, they still have to comply with these rules because they are contracted with the City of Los Angeles and are then subject to Title II. This also applies to courts, public schools and universities, public hospitals and healthcare services, and state benefit programs. Social media is included under these requirements because it's considered a form of web content made available to the public by a public entity. So for in-depth coverage of the final rule, the related exceptions, and more, please again watch the recording for the training titled Introduction to ADA Requirements for Web and Mobile Accessibility that we have on our resource library. Okay, so now that we know why we're here and we understand the requirements, we can move on to how we can meet the compliance standards. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are the internationally recognized standards for web and mobile accessibility published by the World Wide Web Consortium. WCAG, I'm going to be calling it WCAG, it's the acronym for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. WCAG 2.1 Level A and Level AA are the technical standards for ADA compliance. So just like the ADA design standards specify what makes a building accessible, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines outline what needs to be done to make our social media content more accessible for people with different disabilities. And this includes people who are blind, deaf, or hard of hearing, have limited mobility, speech disabilities, and so many more types of disabilities. There are 13 guidelines, and each of the guidelines have success criteria that measure accessibility. These come in 3 levels. A is the basic, AA, and AAA. AAA is the highest. This presentation is going to focus on level A and AA because those are the requirements set by the final rule. On this slide, I've included a QR code and a URL that will redirect you to level A and AA requirements. I pulled them into a Google Doc to hopefully make it easier to follow along, and you can review the success criteria. I have put a little star next to the items that apply to social media specifically. And if you need clarification on the ADA requirements or exceptions, You can review the web and mobile accessibility guidance and section by section analysis. I've also included the ada.gov website and the link to the regulations and the fact sheet. They also have a phone number to call for more ADA related information. I think one of the things that I like to remind myself is we didn't write the rules, the Department of Justice did, and we're doing our best also to follow them, even when challenges come up. But ultimately, our goal is to make sure that our content is accessible and we're not creating more obstacles, and we're eliminating obstacles and barriers people with disabilities have so that they have equal access to the internet and the platforms that we use to share information. Okay, so now we're getting into social media accessibility. We're going to go over copy and formatting, images and visuals, audio and video, and best practices during this first section. So let's get into copy and formatting. Okay, so one of the first steps here is when you're creating content, it's really important to keep your writing clear and straightforward. Avoid using jargon or technical terms that might confuse your audience. And if you need to use industry-specific terms, explain them in plain language. Try to limit the use of all caps as much as possible. And while it can be used for emphasis, too much all caps can be hard to read for some people. Always use proper grammar and punctuation. This helps people who use screen readers and those who rely on clear, structured language to follow along. Spell out acronyms the first time you use them. For example, instead of saying WCAG, start with Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and then in parentheses, put the acronym WCAG. And this way everyone knows what you're referring to when you mention the acronym down the line. And then lastly, avoid fancy or decorative fonts. This presentation is using Atkinson Hyperlegible font. It is a free available typeface that can be added to Google and downloaded so that you can use in Canva or Adobe. It was actually developed by the Braille Institute to help low vision readers, and it improves legibility and readability through clear and distinctive letters and numbers. They did a ton of research on the font itself, and as part of the Department on Disability, we recommend it to other city departments and anybody who's looking for a font for branding purposes. Next up, emojis. Emojis are fun. I also love using emojis, but overuse of emojis can disrupt readability, especially for screen reader users. So if you are going to use emojis, I have some rules. Place emojis at the end of sentences. Limit to 3 or fewer per post. Avoid using them in place of words. Avoid using emojis as bullet points or in mid-sentence. And then you can also check the descriptions on emojipedia.org before you use them. This is interesting. It's a website that tells you what the spoken description of each emoji is going to be. So right now, this example on the screen shows a screen grab of Ritz crackers, a thread post that they shared, and it has several red flags. So it seems like this was a trend where people were posting red flags, maybe in response to a bigger post. But if somebody who's using a screen reader is accessing this specific post, they're going to hear triangle on post, and they're not going to hear red flag as intended because the description built into the system that their screen reader is reading out loud is very different. So we want to avoid confusion, and we don't want to be, again, too repetitive on these emojis. This is way too many emojis for one post. Camel case hashtags. Camel case hashtags. The whole goal of this is concept is to capitalize the first letters of words and multiple word hashtags. So this improves the readability of multi-word hashtags and makes them easier to understand at a glance. So on this page here, I have examples for hashtags that show Senior Emergency Meals Program, Community Education Fair, Tenant Rights. Not so easy to read. That section has no capitalization. They just look like long words that all really merge together. But on the other side of this example, we've capitalized every word and fixed a spelling error. So we've capitalized the S in senior, the E in emergency, the M in meals, and the P in program, and it just looks a lot cleaner and it's easy to tell what that hashtag is representing. Okay, moving on to images and videos. Color contrast is a huge, huge deal. There are plenty of color contrast checkers available online. I personally love to use one that WebAIM has developed. It's easy to use, and what you would do is you would compare two colors to get a ratio of at least 4.51 for standard text and 3:1 for larger text. So low contrast text is hard to read in general, but especially difficult for people with visual impairments or people who are colorblind. So the goal is to make your text stand out against the background. For example, light gray text on a white background isn't a good choice. I have a screen grab of some examples, and that is the first one. It is white on a very light gray background, and you can barely read the text, but it says bad contrast on it. But you would want to use high contrast combinations like black text on a white background instead, because that will make the words really pop. So when you're online, you would consider buttons, icons, and other interface elements. You would want to make sure that they have enough contrast to be easily seen. And this is going to help users who have low vision or are using different screen settings. Additionally, color shouldn't be the only way you highlight information. So if you're using color to show status, like green for approved, you're going to want to add a text label or icon, like a little check mark next to that approved or, the green text. And that'll help people who are colorblind or have low vision distinguish that you are using color to convey meaning. So that's an interesting one. I know on this screen right here, we have a line graph, and on the first side of the image, it has lines in blue, red, green, like a different shade of blue. And if you're colorblind, that just looks like a bunch of lines. So the right way to do that would be to distinguish the lines by using dotted lines or dashed lines, and then or solid lines all in one, so that you can tell there are differences between the data that you're trying to show. So when you post, when you're creating images, the goal is to create content that is accessible, right? So you're going to want to start from the beginning. So say you're putting together this graphic, and you want to check to make sure that your text is going to be readable. You would open up a color contrast checker. The one that I have as an example on the screen is the WebAIM color contrast checker that I mentioned. And you would then want to check the text on the background. So over on, starting from like left over to the right, you'll see that there is a contrast checker where I'm looking at the pink against a gray background, and that doesn't pass. So I would need to make the background slightly lighter or make the text slightly bigger. And so if you're looking at this, I know some people are on the phone here. The text is rather large. So that means that it does pass WCAG AA standards. So you technically wouldn't have to change it because it is large text, and it is not too small where it wouldn't pass. And then you're looking at text, white text on a hot pink background. The reason why I like this platform is because you have a color picker. So you would select the color drop, select the color, and then it would show you what that RGB or hue or hex code is. So it takes a lot of that work off of, the mysterious work of trying to find the exact color that you're using. It already is built into that program. And one thing to note that the web content accessibility guidelines mention is that logos are an exemption. They don't have to meet color contrast regulations. But everything else on the image should, especially if you're sharing vital information. Alternative text and image descriptions. So when you post an image, meme, or graphic, one of the rules is to add a text description. And we also refer to this as alt text, ALT text. Alt text will explain the content of the image. And this helps people who use screen readers or need content in different formats like large print or braille. The goal is to keep it simple and clear, describe the key parts of the image, use plain language, and focus on the essential details. For example, if it's a person holding a sign, you would want to mention what the sign says. And I go into this a little bit here. I have an image of a very nice stack of pancakes, nice looking stack of pancakes. Alt text could just say pancakes, and that conveys with the image. This is more of a decorative image in this context. If you want to get more descriptive, you would use an image description such as a stack of pancakes covered in gooey syrup, powdered sugar, and fresh fruit on a white ceramic plate. That really gives a description. Like, you guys can picture it if you're not looking at the image. And there are going to be some context situations where you would want to use an image description compared to alt text. So alt text and image descriptions, again, both provide context for images, but serve slightly different purposes. Alt text is brief and concise, and it's primarily used by people who use screen readers to convey essential content or function of an image for people who are blind or have low vision. Alt text should be short and to the point. Image descriptions, on the other hand, are more detailed explanations, and they can be placed in the surrounding content or linked separately. Their goal is to provide a richer narrative about the image, and these are especially helpful for complex images like infographics or detailed illustrations where more context is needed for the full understanding. You should use alt text for most images that are functional or to provide essential information. And image descriptions should be used when an image has complex details or when more context is necessary for full understanding. I have 3 examples here of image descriptions and 3 photos. And the first photo is of a person, well, I'll read the image descriptions. It's a hand holding up a small fuzzy orange kitten with amber colored eyes and a pink nose. The second image description is a woman in a denim jacket holding a baby in a yellow sweater above her head. They are both smiling and joyful. And the third image, white Ferris wheel with multicolored cars under a clear blue sky on a sunny day. So, as you can see, it's relatively easy to come up with the descriptions, but I do want to mention a little bit about AI here. AI can be helpful to produce alternative text, but there's still room to grow. So it's important to have a human perspective when you review the descriptions. So I recommend using AI as a starting point to generate your alt text, but you should always check for accuracy. And on platforms that you might be using, like Facebook or Instagram, they might already have AI generated image descriptions, auto generated, and they can cause confusion if you haven't reviewed them. So it's best for us to have control over what message we want to put out there. So just keep that in mind when you are using AI. I occasionally, if there's a ton of images that I need alt description for, I will send it in and I'll be like, provide concise alt text, and then I'll get the list back. And that saves me some time, but I make sure to check to ensure that the descriptions are accurate. Text-based images. This is a problem the city has. I see a lot of screen grabbed photos posted of flyers that are very text heavy. So whenever possible, use actual text in the caption, not images that contain text. So only use images of text when it's super essential, like for a brand logo. But if you make captions or if you make graphics for social media posts, I recommend treating them like billboards. You have limited space, time, and characters to get your message across. And you can put those important details in the captions. So instead of making graphic filled excessive paragraphs of text, choose a short quote or title and use that as a graphic. And then in the caption or the written part of your post, you can give a brief description of whatever the statement is. And you can also link it out or put link in bio if you have like a link tree that will redirect people to the page where they can get more information. And so the most important part to take away from this section is even if your graphic is really short and sweet, your alt text is going to need to include the text that is mentioned in the image. And that's one of the web content accessibility rules. So keep that in mind as you're building, as you're creating. And if the image contains essential information, transcribe the text into the post's caption or include it in the alt text. And I'll go over how to include things into the alt text sections in just a few slides. The best solution is to avoid placing critical information only within images. And if the image contains complex information, consider linking it to an accessible web page with the full content so that users can access it and comprehend it a little bit easier. Next up, audio and video. I'm trying to be mindful of time as well because we have a few more slides to go through and I do want to get to your questions. So I'm going to run through these. Audio. One of the rules mentions to provide transcripts for any audio-only media. If the transcript is hosted on an external web page, include a clearly labeled link that says transcript or audio transcript so people know where they're being redirected to. And then just make sure transcripts include not only spoken dialogue, but also descriptions of significant nonverbal sounds and visual cues to provide the full context. I have an example from NASA here. They host a podcast. And so they have the transcript already on that page that people can find the podcast on their website. And it clearly says transcript. It has the name of the person speaking with parentheses host. And then it goes into the full transcript of their speaking portion. When it ends, they have in brackets the word music. to let users know that there's a bit of a gap, there's something going on there, and then it goes into more text that would be somebody else speaking or the same host speaking. Okay, audio description or alternative text. This means that for pre-recorded videos with sound and visual elements, like a video with people talking and that includes important visuals, you need to add one of the following, either audio description or a text alternative. Audio description is a spoken narration of important visual details like actions, characters, scene changes, and on-screen text that are not communicated in the video's dialogue. This allows people who can't see the visuals to understand what's happening. And then alternative text. This is an alternative format. It could be a text description that summarizes both the visuals and the sounds in the video. So there is one exception here that the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines do mention. If the video is just a different way of showing information that's already in text on the web page and it says so, you don't need an additional audio description or text alternative. So I always think of this as like a lyric video. If somebody is sharing, somebody as in like Taylor Swift is sharing her lyric video, it wouldn't need an audio description because there would be a text alternative available if somebody were to go find her lyrics in a different format on a web page. So in short, either audio description or text summary is required to make pre-recorded videos accessible, unless the video simply repeats what's already written on the page. Here's an example of audio description, specifically audio description or alt text. This is a video description that somebody included on Twitter or X, formerly Twitter. So the reason why I included this is because they're sharing a link to a YouTube video that doesn't have an audio description track and doesn't necessarily include alternative text. It may be in the description of the video. So their video description is split up into 2 different posts, and it describes: the video opens on darkness as we hear the sounds of a powerful energy in the background. A woman's voice says, "Do not underestimate the woman in this tower." And then video description 2 of 2 says, "We then see Golden Globe winner Rosamund Pike emerge with her eyes closed. It's Morianne, legendary, oh my gosh, I should have studied this, Aes Sedai of the Blue Aha. As she opens her eyes, light flows around her before the video ends with a bright flash." So that description really paints the picture of what is happening in that video. I'm going to talk a little bit more about audio description here. I just need to take a sip of my tea. Okay. So I could probably do a whole presentation on audio description and captions. We'll get to captions in a bit, but here's one slide. Audio description can be included in 2 ways: as a separate audio track that users can select if they need it, or in a second version of the video that combines the original audio with the audio descriptions so that users who need it can watch this accessible version. If you're looking for examples of audio description, I recommend checking out the State of Colorado's Department of Transportation page on their social media. The State of Colorado actually had a state mandate that made the same Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Their compliance date was set for 2024. So they've been taking the lead on a lot of this, and they've had to be in compliance for the last 2 years. So you'll see that they share their videos. One video is just the video showing the regular content, and then they provide an alternative version that includes the audio description. It's really interesting. So if you have a moment, I would recommend looking at it. Okay, one other thing, this is probably going to be more on websites that you're sharing social media content on, but autoplaying, there's guidance on autoplay. So autoplaying audio can be jarring or inaccessible for many users. So always give users a way to pause or stop the audio, as well as control its volume independently from their device's main settings. So GIFs are fun and attention grabbing. We love them. I love using them, but it's important to make sure that they're accessible for everybody. So if possible on the platform that you're working with, you would set up so your GIFs stop playing after 5 seconds. That continuous looping can be distracting and overwhelming for some users. Next, you would provide users with a way to pause or stop the GIF if they need to. Depending on the platform that you're using, you're going to want to avoid using GIFs that have rapid blinking or flashing because they can trigger seizures or physical reactions in some people. And if your GIFs include text, just make sure that there's enough contrast in the background so that it's easy to read. There is more guidance. I don't want to get too technical on this, but autoplay settings that you can control, you would want to make sure are set to allow people to pause. Flashing content, again, can trigger seizures or physical reactions in some users. Avoid intense flashing lights or rapidly changing visuals to prevent triggering photosensitive epilepsy or other sensitivities. If flashing is necessary, limit to 3 flashes per second. You can also include a warning at the start of the caption of the post that mentions that flash is present. I would say content warning, this video contains flashing lights that may affect viewers with photosensitive epilepsy or other sensitivities. That way people are prepared and can decide if they want to view the video or not. And this kind of ties into the last slide. If you autoplay a video or don't change the settings so that the video is autoplaying as soon as somebody goes onto that site, it could be harmful. So that's why there's guidance around that. Okay, now we're at captions. Okay, captions are essential for making video content accessible. If you're sharing a pre-recorded video that includes audio, like dialogue or important sounds, captions must be included. And this applies to any video that combines visuals and audio, and that is known as synchronized media. Captions can be provided in 2 ways, either through open or closed captions. Open captions are the captions that are always visible. You can't turn them off, while closed captions can be turned on or off by the viewer. It's important to note that captions should not be confused with subtitles. Subtitles only show dialogue, and they're usually in languages other than English, whereas captions include both dialogue and important non-speaking sounds, like music or sound effects, to provide extra context. Videos that include captions are actually proven to be more successful because they are able to reach a wider audience and they're more inclusive. However, relying on a platform's auto-generated captions like those on Instagram or YouTube, that does not meet the required accessibility standards. Auto captions are often inaccurate and can miss key information. So I, again, recommend if you use auto-generated captions, you would then need to review it all to ensure that it is accurately transcribing what is being spoken, that the spelling errors are fixed, and that the synchronization matches the video. If you're writing your own captions, it's important to make them clear and easy to read. So you would break your captions at natural language breaks. That makes it easier for viewers to read and follow along. Make sure that there's enough time for viewers to read each caption before it moves on to the next one. As I mentioned, include captions for non-speaking audio. And then be sure to identify when a new speaker starts talking, especially when they're not visible on the screen. This helps keep viewers on track with the conversation and know who's speaking at all times. Live video and audio content, like a live streamed event or broadcast, need to have live captions. So there are several ways to provide live captions. This one you are able to use auto-generated captions for. You can also hire a cart captioner. That is what we refer to as real-time captioning. And live captioning software is something that integrates with the streaming platforms. A lot of people are using YouTube Live that offers the automatic captions. And the most important part is once you have finished your recording, finished your live stream, you review and edit them afterward for accuracy. And to improve the accuracy of live captions, I have some tips here. You can use automatic captions for informal settings, and you would want to consider hiring professional services for key events. Ensure you have clear, high quality audio with minimal background noise to make captions more precise. Let your audience know that you're using auto-generated captions by adding a disclaimer and providing contact details, contact information if they have any follow-up questions or would like to request the transcript or the file in an alternative format. And then again, edit captions after those live events to improve accuracy for future viewers who are looking back at the recorded version. And on this slide here, I have an example of two people. It looks like they're celebrating Christmas. They have ugly sweaters on, and the captions on this image read off the Rent Those Reindeer. And as if we're looking into the context, they're probably trying to say Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but those captions are not accurate and they can lead to confusion. And if we're looking at, as an agency providing accurate information, that isn't accurate, might make us look a little silly or not credible. So we just want to make sure that we are checking those. Okay, almost done. Whew. We are going to talk about working with specific platforms now. For those of you who were able to let us know which platforms you're working with, I noticed that you guys are using Instagram and Facebook often. I also included how to add alt text on X. So let me get over to there. Let's see. Facebook first. This is an example of what it looks like to upload a photo and change the alternative text. This is a screen grab from a desktop platform. So you would upload your content. In this case, it is a photo. And then you would go into change the alternative text. So you would click the edit button, search for alternative text, and you would add the alternative text. The alt text that has been generated on this image isn't extremely descriptive. This one says may be an image of body of water, twilight, palm trees, sky, and nature. Our custom alt text says a brilliant purple, pink, gold, and orange sunset reflected in the water of a calm canal bordered by palm trees and waterside houses. the impact is so much greater when we have control over the messaging. So that is how to add alt text over here in Facebook. This is the one, this slide shows how to do it on your phone or on the mobile app. This constantly changes and that kind of bugs me, but I understand these platforms have to make changes to keep up. But so I really hope this is still accurate. If you are trying to upload that same photo on Facebook on the mobile app, you would want to look for the three dots and option, and the three dots would then allow something to pop up that would give you the opportunity to remove the photo, edit the photo, make 3D, or edit alt text. So you would then select edit alt text and you would add in your description and click done, and then you will be good to go. Now let's head over to Instagram. Okay, if you're using Instagram on your desktop, the accessibility feature is really easy to see. You don't have to search for it, which is really nice. You can add your caption, and then you would just look down on the list and you would be able to add your alt text in the accessibility section. Some platforms, again, will provide the option to automatically create alt text for your photo. And I recommend always choosing to write your own or to insert your own into that section. Here's what it looks like on a mobile device. The accessibility section is hidden under advanced settings. So you upload your photo, look at your options, and you would click advanced settings, scroll down, look for the accessibility section, and then the write alt text section. You'll be able to add in the alt text. You'll click done, and then go back to making sure the rest of your post looks good. And then on X, formerly Twitter, this is also changing, but it seems to be the easiest way to find the to add description button. So it has the add description button without having to take any extra steps to find it. You would select add description, put in your alt text, and then click save, and then you can go ahead and post. I have some resources here. We have a Department on Disability social media checklist. This one goes over a variety of platforms, including LinkedIn and YouTube. And then you can also take a look at the web content accessibility guidelines. The language is technical, but they provide a lot of solutions, definitions, and ways you can implement the requirements that they set. And then we also have resources through the ADA National Network. This is the Accessibility Online section. They have archived training sessions. It's also a great way to connect with people that you can reach out to over email or over phone to ask ADA requirement questions. I included the link again to the color contrast checker. And WebAIM, the organization who hosts this, also have really, really great trainings. They're very good and beneficial, but they aren't always free. So something to look out for. And then in addition, a lot of the information that I covered today can be found on accessible-social.com. They offer resources that are available in plain language that are really easy to pick up on. And you can also reach out to them if you ever get stuck on anything social media related. And then over here on this slide, it's a picture of a quote by Haben Girma. She is a disability rights lawyer, author, and speaker. In the image, she's typing on a Braille writer, and the slide includes a description of this image that reads, Haben Girma speaks to an audience saying, quote, "Don't assume what people with disabilities can or can't do. Just assume that they will use your service or product and design it to be accessible by everyone. This is an example of what you need to provide for an image with text. So I wanted to end that do that with you guys. And now I believe it is time for questions. I'm going to pass it back over to the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment.
Thank you, Ashley, for that really great information and content. We had a very active Q&A portion. So I do have a few questions that we kind of highlighted for you to perhaps if you could answer. And if you don't have it, we could follow up afterwards with our attendees. But one of the questions that we have is, should we be putting accessibility links up now anyways? And should we prep for the potential visual disabilities now?
Well, that's really interesting because the city has recently released some guidance on on kind of the next steps to get started. So I believe if you talk to your Department of Neighborhood Empowerment liaison, there is somebody assigned to web and mobile accessibility. And the instructions that they recently received are to add an accessibility statement on websites and on social media platforms. And so there's language already provided. There's a link that you can share. So yes, I recommend doing it now and including it on websites. And I include it as link in bio using Linktree. So it's just one section in the link trees that I then have linked onto all of my social media platforms.
Thank you for that. Another question that doesn't have a lot of content. Oh, I think it was answered. Okay. Do the requirements apply to the back end for web administration?
Yeah, like big time. So here at the Department on Disability, we don't have a systems analyst. We had to hire somebody. So we specifically requested funding in our budget for the annual fiscal year to hire a contractor that does web editing. And thankfully, the person that we connected with has experience in the web content accessibility guidelines because they have had to work with our web host platform, which is Drupal, and with the city's ITA team because that's who manages the city department's websites. So yes, there's a lot to consider. Again, I just went over social media. I didn't go over the website content, but there are things to keep in mind, especially after you get your website audited. You may be looking into getting it audited using AI. We recommend doing AI and a manual test. And then the reports that they provide should give you or the person making those web edits guidance on what needs to be remediated.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I know that you're touch base right now on social media. So one of the questions or remarks was, if we don't own the app, example, Instagram, ADA compliance is not our problem, though best practices may still be desirable.
That's not what the rule says. Unfortunately, I understand we're limited in what we can do because we don't own Instagram. But the rule says that if you are representing your local government, your department, your office on social media such as Instagram, that content needs to be accessible. So this also applies to like if you are sharing something on behalf of a nonprofit organization in your neighborhoods, and you just want to do like a repost or a retweet, that may not be in compliance if they haven't made that post accessible. So you would then want to save that photo, write in your own caption just to ensure that you're resharing content in an accessible format.
Yeah, thank you. Another one, when you touch base on just the text, what is considered acceptably large text for a given ratio?
It depends on what you're doing online or if you're printing content out. And the ADA actually doesn't specify this at all. The best practice that we use is that regular text should not be smaller than size 12 font. And then large text is anything size 18 font and higher, 18 point font and higher.
Thank you. This question was based on some of the video slides that you were covering. So how do you cover the entirety of a video with all text and image descriptions?
You get creative and you take some time with it. You'll notice too, if you look into Colorado, they've just like stopped sharing videos. And as the Department on Disability, we don't do a lot of video sharing in general. We're limited in our staff and capacity, but you would need to either, there are vendors that you can hire and you can send a file over to them and they can then give you the transcript back or the audio description back. That does require a bit of a budget and some time. But if you have to do it on your own, just give yourself some time to get it done. And the important thing to keep in mind is to highlight the really important things that people will be missing if they don't have access to the visuals for the audio description and then for the video description as well, including those non-spoken contents to make sure you're providing context in the transcript.
Thank you. Regarding the image description, sometimes we would use a symbolic image. For example, that kitten might be illustrating a local kitten adoption event. Would you describe the event or the kitten?
It depends. You don't want to repeat your content too much. So if you're already talking about that adoption event in the caption, your alt text may just be adorable kitten that you could meet at this event. So you want to take a step back and review what is mentioned and make sure that your alt text is descriptive, but doesn't repeat too much of the content that's already been written out. And then the other thing about alt text is just keep it concise if you can. I hope that answers the question. Alt text is tricky because there are very strict rules on it, and you can get creative or, go a different direction.
Thank you, Ashley. And then are brackets the only way to indicate things like music? What if brackets are used within the normal text?
I don't think there are specific guidelines about how to include other sounds or context sounds. And I'm not really sure what you mean by other text, because captions would be for speaking portions. I mean, I think that might be a question that you'd have to ask or email Dunn about, and then I'll be able to answer it with a little bit more time and accurate information.
Thank you. I know we had a question here regarding to avoid any ADA issues with YouTube videos, we post videos as individuals versus as a city. That should eliminate ADA issues unless it's broadcast TV. But it questions of a city license to do that, which may be the sand in the machine. It's a lot on that one.
I guess what I'll say is that's okay if you're posting videos as an independent person, but I mean, from a public information perspective, just consider that you're representing a neighborhood council and the city as a whole. But if the neighborhood council YouTube page then decides to share that video will need to make sure it meets accessibility guidelines.
Thank you for that. I know we had a question in here. I'm trying to pull it back up. So what is the expectation for old content on YouTube? We have old videos dating back to 10 years. For example, NC election candidate town halls. Are we expected to take down old content until we have attached and enabled a transcript on that?
Thank you for bringing that up. So the final rule actually mentions that this the way that this applies to social media begins on the compliance date. So you don't have to go back and edit your content if it is before April 24th, 2027. What I highly recommend is starting now, April 29th, 2026, is making content accessible so that you're getting the hang of it and you're a pro in a year. So you wouldn't need to worry about removing videos. You wouldn't need to remediate or add alt text to posts. However, you still have an obligation with the ADA if a constituent comes up to you and says, "Hey, I would like for to request an accommodation, and I really want this video's transcripts." Under the ADA Title II, you would need to consider that accommodation and then provide that accommodation the way that they're requesting to your best ability. So from now until then, you still have an obligation to make material accessible and to meet accommodation requests.
Thank you, Ashley. I know that a lot of this you provide a lot of content for tonight. But one of the questions is, do you happen to have any training specifically on detail steps you need to do to cover all of everything that you kind of covered today? I know that's it's a broad answer because you covered a lot. But do you have anything specifically, any specific trainings that are more detailed on step-by-step guidance on how to do these things?
No, but I provided links to resources, and you can, go on YouTube or go on the internet and search for more. This is, unfortunately, the Department on Disability can't be there to support every department in very specific or hands-on ways. Our goal is to educate people on the rules and regulations, and then everybody needs to kind of do the work on their own to make sure that they're in compliance. And it is the way that it is. We wish it were different.
Yeah, thank you. So what happens with translation? Is there any way to show captions in two different languages?
Yeah, this is something that I've been actually talking to YouTube with, because they are providing auto-generated captions in English, and then they're providing subtitles in dubbed languages. Um, in that case, in this specific question, I would consider doing the this is going to take some like editing work, but doing the captions as open captions on the video and providing the subtitles in the different languages as something that people can use as closed captions. It takes some finagling. So it's a question that I would recommend doing a little bit of research on your own.
Yeah, thank you. One of the questions we have is on Instagram. So how should we handle Instagram stories? Is there an option to add alternative text or on stories? Sorry, just with the question.
Yeah, stories are not accessible. Um, and and I don't think they will ever be. Um, we if we're sharing content, we are making sure that we are not only sharing it in stories. So we might share a post that we recently got up on the grid in our stories, and that's fine. Um, I just don't, there aren't specific rules on stories, especially because they have that time limit on them. So I don't know if it's good advice to just say, like, use them cautiously, and don't share vital information through them. If you do want to reshare things, go ahead, but for the important things that your neighborhood council is sharing, make it a post and then share it that way.
Thank you. So how about PDF files on the website? Do we need to remove the old PDFs?
Yeah, because that exception about not having to remove or remediate social media content only applies to social media. PDFs are considered web content because they are hosted on websites. And the only way to kind of meet this is something that I probably am not as experienced in talking about. So you may want to do some more research on this, but um, if that PDF file is currently no longer being used to provide a service or apply for a program, the final rule has a really specific exception on this. You can archive it. But if it's still being used to apply for a program or to get access to something that the city or an agency is providing, it needs to be accessible. So you would need to remediate it and re-upload the accessible version. Um, so the introduction to web and mobile app training that I mentioned a couple times early on in my presentation mentions all of the exceptions. So it's something to look into. But yes, what I recommend is going through every PDF that your website hosts, identifying the ones that you can either remove or archive. When you archive content, it has to be specifically put into a section labeled archive, and it cannot be updated after that. It's just going to live there if somebody stumbles upon it and wants to look at it. And then review that same list after you've archived things. Find those vital documents, the ones that people are downloading the most often or using to apply for a program. Make those accessible, upload them so you have that covered, and then start working down the list on the other documents that you need to remediate.
That includes, we have some of our webmasters here in tonight's training as well, because they're the direct person who kind of works with the neighborhood council. You touched base on this right now, so the website is loaded with agendas and minutes and PDFs and everything. Are they just removing all this institutional knowledge, or is it just better to archive it? Even if you archive it, is that sufficient enough?
This is a question that we're working on with the city council. If the agenda mentions programs that are currently active, it needs to be accessible and remediated. You can archive the content that was from 10 years ago. That's what we archived content 5 years and older, and we made it available in our archive section. And that includes web pages that are no longer active and PDFs for our Commission on Disability. But it is something that the City Council is currently doing. They've hired a company called Doc Access, and Doc Access goes in and adds a layer to websites where people can then view the PDF or convert it into an accessible format. It's working for them because they have thousands and thousands of files that they just can't take down or remediate. So there are platforms out there, but best practice would be to find those current programs or PDFs that mention current programs. It's a lot of work, so we're still working on it.
You mentioned your 5 years for yourself. Is there a specific requirement now with this new law on the PDF archive date on the websites? Is there a specific time period that they have to have? You mentioned 5 years. Is that applicable for the neighborhood councils as well?
No, that's just our own judgment being used. The rule specifically says that information that is currently being used to apply for a program or access a facility, or anything like that needs to be accessible and cannot be archived. So look into the exceptions a little bit more, but you wouldn't be able to archive just anything, even if it's 10 years old, but it's still talking about something that you're doing now in current times. You would not be able to archive that.
Yeah, and I think some of the questions that we're receiving do pertain more so with the department development as well as with the city clerk's funding division, like CIPs, MPGs, any of the documents that they use. That as well with the city, we have to be in compliance as well. So all of those will be ADA compliant. It will be made accessible to each neighborhood council as well. So just as neighborhood councils are complying with their own ADA, us in the city as well, with the resources, the neighborhood councils have to be compliant as well. So we're working on that as well, because I know we're receiving a few questions on that. So just wanted to touch base that we are also on our end, going along as well with the developments. We're all in this together. Luckily, we have that extension to be able to give us some grace period to kind of get up and running. But I know we have a few other questions, but we could get to those after fact. I could email you those and kind of get those. But I want to thank you again for making yourself accessible. For those who are here, this is one of many trainings that hopefully, as things continue to develop, that we'll be able to provide to neighborhood councils to give you the resources, not only for yourself, but also with the webmasters that you currently have for your neighborhood councils. So I want to thank those who are here that were present, my staff that also helped answer a lot of these Q&A questions on the back. Ashley, from the Department on Disability. Thank you so much for making yourself accessible. She will be sharing the resources provided with tonight's training as well. So we will be sharing that with all the neighborhood councils with the links that she shared with us tonight. If you have any other questions that you want perhaps answered that wasn't answered in this, please feel free to email me directly, and I will share that question with Ashley and hopefully answer it to our best of our ability. But hopefully we're able to conduct more trainings in the next coming months before the deadline comes up. Thank you, Ashley, again. I want to thank you. I mean, I can't thank you enough because I know that this has landed and has developed really quickly. So thank you again for making yourself accessible.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all. Again, feel free to ask any questions, send me any direct emails. We are developing more trainings for this in regards to ADA compliance. I'm hoping to be able to provide you more tools. Thank you for joining us. You will be receiving the recording and any slides, and have a great night.